Hi, Kimba.
Hello. The Kimba radio broadcast, episode 15, Big Boss Man. I will have a special guest. He is actually responsible for me being an on-air DJ. So if you have any complaints, you send him his way. He'll be on with me momentarily because he's also going to help me give some insight to this Requestion from Carlos. Carlos writes me, I have totally binged watched your YouTube series and love you and appreciate you more than ever after years of listening. Can you elaborate a bit more on what it was like to work with Neil Rogers? I really loved his show. Radio has never been the same without him. I love your stories. Well, first, Carlos, thanks. Thanks so much for listening all these years. Very kind words. Thank you for continuing by watching the podcasts. If you haven't already, if you would subscribe to the channel too, so I know you're there. Thank you. I'd appreciate that. As for Neil Rogers, I do mention him a bit in episode 3 of Meet Kimba radio broadcast. It's a gas. But I will give you as much perspective as I can. My guest can give some insight what it was like on his side. For those who don't know, Neil Rogers was a very extremely successful popular talk show host in South Florida, pretty much from 1976 till 2009 when he retired. Earlier this month, Neil's longtime producer, Jorge Rodriguez, unexpectedly passed away. He was only 55 years old. Now, while I've met George, my experience with Neil happened in the years before George was in the picture. I was a teeny tiny part in that I was there of Neil's foray into FM, the FM dial, because for the most part he was on AM doing his talk show. Neil was on WINZ, W-I-N-Z, since early 1984, and I was hired to be a board op in late December of 1986. And a board op, if you don't know, that's the person behind the scenes, the person who keeps everything on time, plugs in commercials. So if it's a talk show, you'll answer the calls and get the callers set up for the talk show host to answer. And you're rarely part of the show. There at INZ, we called the studio we were in Master Control, or we called it the Enterprise, because that's what it looked like. You were elevated a little bit, so you were higher, so you could see what was going on in all of the studios. But also there was just giant windows. So directly in front of me would be the news anchors. And then if I looked over to the right, that was the talk show studio, and all of the talk shows shared it. Neil eventually would have his own studio, but in this case, not. And then to the left were alternate anchor booths or booths just to do production. We could kind of see everything that was going on in all of the different studios. When I got hired as a board op, it was my first job in radio, and I had to learn the system there. So in order to do so, Kyle Isley, he was also what you would now call the producer for Neil's show, the guy who would answer all of Neil's fans' calls. So Neil was on the air from 10 a.m. till 2 p.m. I was to sit in with Kyle, learn how to run the board for a talk show because I would be doing them on the weekends. I don't recall Neil ever saying a word to me or about me. I more remember Kyle answering the phones, screaming at Neil's callers, curse them out and hang up on them. And it was pretty interesting to be new in radio and watch this go on. It was just very chaotic. Would not by any stretch call him warm and fuzzy, but outside of being on the air, he was very quiet and unassuming, so I wouldn't necessarily call him mean either, although he could be. You didn't see him walk around. He didn't roam the station, or you didn't see him having conversations with people in the hallways. So you fast forward to October of 1987, and the decision was made to move Neil to mornings. That's where my guest will hopefully have a lot more information on how that came to be. That said, I started my on-air the weekend before Neil Rogers was to start on Zeta Monday morning. And I had just started that weekend doing the overnight show. So I was very new to the station. Kyle stayed as a board op over on WINZ. When Neil went to Zeta, he had Glenn the Bird Hill as his producer and on-air sidekick, and Dave Caprita, who was known as Captain Dave Caprita then. And they were on the air until November of 88. So it was just over a year. And then Neil moved to WIOD and Glenn went with him. Glenn was eventually let go in 1989, and Glenn passed away in 2000. He was only 51. As I mentioned, after he left Zeta, he went to WIOD, and that's where George joined him in 1991 and was with Neil until Neil retired. Neil went to QAM in December of 1997. And never saw him at a staff meeting, never saw him at a holiday party, just basically came and did his show and left. The things he got away with saying and doing probably will not happen again in my lifetime. Totally time to bring him on board. This is the guy who hired me to be on the air on Zeta way back in 1987. And for that, I am forever grateful. He goes by the name of Peter Bolger.
Hi, Kimba.
Hi, Pete.
Hey, Kimber, how are you?
Do you mind saying where you are?
Not at all. I'm in a suburb of Portland, Oregon. Well, we've had a house here for about 3.5 years. This is where we met. My wife and I, Michelle and I met. We left, and she we both really love the Northwest. I said, don't worry. We're in broadcasting. We'll be back in Portland in 2 years. Guys.
I just want to make sure that you are not the reason that all those federal officers were there.
I don't want to.
How did you get from Oregon to Miami? Like, what was the impetus for you to get hired at Zeta?
I was the program director of KGON. We had a consultant by the name of George Harris. He had been hired to consult the station in Miami, 95 INZ. It was the strangest station I ever heard in my life. I got a call from him, and this is what's happening. Are you interested? It just so happened that about a year or so earlier, I had taken a cruise with some friends out of Miami, and we're sitting at the back end of our ship, looking at, the beautiful skyline and the water and people just enjoying life, boating and skiing and jet skiing and everything. And I had these very nice recollections of that. But the thing that I was most interested in is that sister station was an all-news station. And that excited me more than anything because I loved the spoken word format. I never thought I was going to get involved with it. But later that week, I flew in for an interview and got the job.
I'm hearing birds outside of your window.
I'm outside, actually. It's such a beautiful day.
That sounds so lovely. It's very refreshing. You got here in 87. And as I've told in my earlier episodes, I was hired in 86 as a board op. In my episode 2, Get a Job, is where you'll hear my audition that you got. Glenn Wild was a part-timer, and he
left to go to GTR.
Okay.
And I had totally forgotten, what circumstances were of having a need for a overnight weekend personality. I had a call with the great late Bob Gator of Miami Lakes Tech. I asked her, I said, I'm just looking for a part-time person for overnights and weekends. Obviously not the greatest of hours. Could be a huge opportunity for someone who was just looking to break in. And he said, well, I think I've got someone for you. In fact, that person's in your building right now. And I said, really? I hope you don't mind it's a woman. And I said, I don't really care about that. He said, all right, well, I'll let her know. I don't even remember the circumstances of any kind of interview or you dropping the tape off or anything.
Bob must have told me, but also Scott Legere, you got to bring your tape over. And I was petrified. Again, in another episode, I talk about how shy I was, and I was just petrified to bring it to you. Not because I had met you and you were mean to me or anything. I just was like, the thing I want to do most in life. Scott walked over, got me by the hand with my tape, and brought me to your office. And I think he even handed you the tape. And he had been helping me. He'd been listening to Aircheck. So I think he said, here's your new employee. Like, he was really had my back.
Let me tell you something. Any program director will tell you, if they're trying to fill the overnight weekend position, is the person breathing? Hired.
I know. I knew that was part of it too. I'm like, I'm there already. I'm already in the building. I'm willing to work those hours. I knew that had a lot to do with it as well. You basically called me not that long after because I was running the board over there, and you said, can you start this weekend? Let me check my schedule. I mean, I was beside myself.
Best decisions ever.
You are actually the person who gave me my first shot at what became my career.
That's sorry. I didn't know this business would become what it's become. But
here on the podcast, that people want to know about radio. This Requestion from Carlos. What Neil Rogers was really like.
He's the kind of person, kind of the talent, who can do something that no other talent can do. He went from station to station to station in South Florida, and within a very short period of time, he would take care of that problem, and his show would be number one. People can't do that normally. A person can't go from station to station to station and quickly bring their audience with him. I think that says an awful lot.
I guess he wanted to break into FM.
I think he saw an opportunity. He felt that what he did, and he was right, would attract a much younger audience. audience, and FM was where to be. And here there were 3 stations all pretty much playing the same music at that time. And you remember, like a couple of months before Neil went over to Zeta, she had hired Joey Reynolds. And they were making a bit of inroads with it because it was so much. It was different. It was fun. It was not your typical rock and roll morning show. Gary Lawrence was the general manager of Zeta and Winds at the time, and he put the deal together. When I think of Neil, I think of the absolute best talent that I've ever encountered. He's the only one that I know that has hours and hours and hours and hours, hundreds of hours of shows online for free, and people are listening. His fans have web things dedicated to him and the show.
And it'll be 10 years this December since he passed. And this is the kind of power that he wielded. I was working Tuesday through Saturday overnight because you came to me and told me, Neil wants you to be on overnights every day he's on. So I had to be shifted.
Yeah, it was a great deal of respect that he had for you. He knew there was talent, and I think other people had a tendency to kind of play to him as opposed to do their job and do a good radio show. Instead, he would come in and all of a sudden they would have to try to entertain him, including on the air trying to do Neelism. I've seen a lot of great talk talent come to Miami. They had their own thing. If they had just done their own thing, they would have done well. But they come to Miami and they heard Neil and they said, I want to do that.
Sometimes he would come in and be super chatty. We'd joke about our love for Steven Tyler, our mutual affection. Other times, nothing. Never knew from day to day what mood he would be in. There were mornings if he thought I tried to be too funny. On my way driving out, I'd hear, they're in the Tangerine Tanker. No, she's pretty hopped up today. But I'd come to find if he really, really hated you, he would eviscerate you.
Totally. And you just would be like a non-entity.
If he liked you, he'd tease you. Like if you haven't figured out by now, Pete Bolger is Rose Bolger. If he was indifferent to you, to me, that was the worst because
particularly talk show hosts, it's the worst thing that can happen. Well, I think any kind of talent, the reaction to that person is like, it's all right, I guess. Mm-hmm. You'd rather have, I cannot stand that. Well, because they did this, and one day I heard them do this. I never listened to them, but every day I hear them do this and this and this.
I think you had us on a rather loose tether. You let us experiment. And if we went too far,
it's easier to reel somebody in than to push them out their comfort zone. Zeta, we had a very diverse group of personalities. Late Mike Lyons and Tom certainly did his thing. Steve Stansel, after he came over, definitely a free spirit and brought a whole different kind of edge to the station. And of course, Kimba at night. But the main thing that I was always trying to do is just make sure if we can, music's still the star. I want that personality, but we just got to fine tune it as much as possible. And that's why it worked. I mean, you think about it. Zeta was the surviving rock station. I mean, GTR went away, made Zeta's life a lot easier. And I'll tell you a little story about when we were being sold to Paxson. Bud was big believer in really deep down hardcore research, something that's never done anymore. People were saying, Zeta's going to flip to country because he had a country station up in Jacksonville. Now, I knew that wasn't the case. The day that the sale, when he and Jim Bocock came in and we had a meeting in like big long conference room at 207th Drive, remember that long table in the conference room? He had never seen a station so well positioned as Zeta.
The songs that we used to play.
Because we had a pretty tight playlist. What accentuated it, we really did well, but I believed that you could hand place, not just press the button on selector and let it go. Hand place, whether it's, Nature's Way from Spirit or something like that, just a really off a track that isn't necessarily a hit. And if you pre-sell it correctly, you back it up with More Than a Feeling or Hotel California on the other side. That was what I really believed in, throwing in those little nuggets and making sure the talent would really key in, as opposed to, hey, here's Birthday by the Beatles again.
It's so much tighter now, and it's just all the hits all the time because of PPM. I guess because we just heard about the passing of Alan Young. We were in a staff meeting. For some reason, I remember Alan, why can't we play some really deep Leonard Skinner track? And it makes me laugh now because we did play deeper tracks then compared to what it is.
I think I kind of beaten y'all into submission to say to know that, hey, you guys have it pretty good as far as tertiary tracks are concerned. I started out in true free-form progressive radio at WIBA FM in Madison, where it was Radio Free Madison, and we picked the music. Now, we thought we were pretty smart about it, but we ended up getting killed in the ratings eventually by a much more slickly formatted FM station. We changed. The station basically went from anything goes to an extremely tight playlist. And guess which station became in a short period of time. So some of my compadres who I know that were just mortified, and no way in hell were they going to be playing music off a computerized list. The way I looked at it was, you mean I don't have to worry about what song I have to play? I can just kind of concentrate on doing the next break.
I don't know if you remember this or not. No, it's not a bad thing. I have the audio of 3 of them. You did 3 promos for me as Mr. Rogers.
Sure, I did.
And
stings, it's right.
That I have the bee stings one.
Hi, how are you? Can you say damn it? Sure, I knew you could. I knew you could, Kimba. Sure. I like to make Kimba's t-shirt tight. Can you say bee stings? Sure.
I have a Halloween one. That's pretty innocuous. You're just, can you say pumpkin?
Hi, can you say scary? You want to come into my haunted house? I'll show you something scary. Sure. We'll dress up like goblins and witches and things, and bob for apples. You like to carve a little pumpkin? Can you say pumpkin? Sure. You say it nice, Kimba.
But then I have the all request one. And I don't know if you remember what you say in that.
Right.
Call Kimba up and make her play your request. Can you say, now, bitch?
I do remember that. Sure.
Sure.
Important message from Zeta 4's program director.
Is that a boy dog? Oh, hi, boys and girls. Can you say pain in the ass? Well, can you? Sure, it's okay. I've reserved a special time just for you. The All Request Show. Call Kimba and make her play what you want to hear. Can you say, now, bitch? Sure, I knew you could.
And they're really funny. Not only to have your boss do them, now they'd be like, oh, you...
Would it be an HR probably, and getting my walking papers moments later.
What I realized is we had so much more fun because we were allowed to have our freak flag flying. We were allowed to color outside the lines sometimes.
You know what? There were 3 stations that were playing the same music. We had to differentiate ourselves.
When you had us saying Zeta 4 in between every single song, because we had switched from, I guess, Zeta 94.9 to we were calling the Zeta 4 back. I believe you had a log note, something to the effect of match your inflection to the mood of the song. And right. I'm in there talking to Scott, and he cracks open the mic and he reads the log note.
Of course he.
Oh, match the inflection to the mood of the song. And when he closed the mic, I'm sitting there, because I'm the newbie.
You're accomplice to the crime, right?
But I'm like, oh, you can do that? And that just, not that I ever did.
Scott, I think, was one of the most naturally gifted air personalities. Made it seem so...
effortless.
Yeah. And I'm sure inside it was the minds were, everything was cranking a million miles an hour, but it was just so effortless.
100%. I am so grateful and lucky that he was one of the first people that I had listening to air checks, and that I got to spend time in the studio and watch him work. And he really, some people have a natural ability, but if they don't put any effort, they're just, He had a natural ability, and he was always up here with it. Not only was he Scott Legere, he was the Ledge.
Right.
Over on the West Coast, yeah.
And he had an amazing career over in the Bay market.
Yeah, he was such a talent. Casey McCoy. Scott and Casey, I was just so lucky to have those 2 guys kind of guiding me. And you brought Casey from Oregon.
Yes, from KGON. He was doing middays. Folks in Portland made it a point by saying, you will not hire anybody. Well, I got to Miami. Issues were a lot more dire than I thought it was. You need a whole new staff. I called Casey. He wanted to move out. The people in Portland were less than happy with me. And Michelle was the assistant to the general manager in Portland at the time. So poor Michelle had to catch his wrath because they were pissed off at me. And I understand that. We worked through it because I said, you know what? Casey was leaving.
So I was working overnights and he was working 7 to midnight, and he and I became roommates when
right.
he...
The place was near the Caddyshack.
Yes.
Overlooking the Caddyshack golf
with the
course.
bubble windows, yep. He was let go, and I was promoted to his shift. I think about this now. I'm like, who would do this now? You told me what had happened, that he was let go, and that you wanted to promote me to 7 to midnight. And I said I had to go home and talk to him. Like, I didn't say, yes.
Close to him, and I get that. I don't remember that. Part of my belief in you, because I think most people I would have said, no, no, you tell me now. As a roommate, it was someone who had spent a lot of time coaching you. I understand that.
And he was, as you would expect, extremely gracious and was like, oh, of course you're going to take it.
I actually saw him a couple of years ago. Two or 3 years ago, there was a KGON alumni party here. As important as KGON was to me from a career and personal situations where I met Michelle, I was only here for about 2.5 years, which was by far my shortest.
Yeah.
All of my travels, but I had a chance to meet him, and we talked about it. And that's radio. That's going to happen. It's science and art, and then sometimes the art says, nope, I need a different color there. And
I think that was because that was my very first experience with that aspect of the business, and it was hit very close to home. And I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That was the first time, but it wasn't the last time that somebody else was going to be displaced, and I was going to get in there.
All over their warm body to get the job.
Right. Paxson came in. I was doing mornings, and they brought Ron and Ron in.
How did you in mornings in the worst way when he got there? They was not a fan of Mike Lyons, and Mike ended up in middays. And Kimba was the one that everyone was talking about, according to him, and which he was right about.
Well, Bud came to me and said, you're not going anywhere, because usually this syndicated show's coming. You're doing the show now. I think by then it was 6 to 10 at night, and I said, I'll go back, but you have to keep my salary.
Right.
And he said, oh, but you're going back tonight. I'm like, you think you were paying me a morning salary? Who are you kidding?
Right. I did not know any of that.
Yeah. When did you go over to Wins?
When was Andrew?
August of 92.
Okay. All right. So it was later that year.
I'm so glad you have that video that you took.
Kimba's here. Ready to spend the night? And watch. Hold on.
It was this giant JVC. Wins, the all-news station, after Hurricane Andrew, perhaps the biggest news event, the all-news station had its worst ratings ever. I don't know the exact timing of things, but unfortunately that meant a change of regime. And when I was group program director, Guy Gannett, I had put together for Tim Williams like about an 8 or 9 page, this is what I suggest for Wins, we should do this, the format and all these things. Tim said, well, save it for another day because nothing's going to happen now. Okay, fine. Well, I don't know if you remember Bill Scott, who was a consultant for Bud Paxson's news stations. They had been trying to find a program director for Wins, and one day he just came down to my office and sat in and just expressed the frustration about trying to find somebody. He asked me, do you know anybody? And I went, well,
this guy.
I pulled out my drawer here, and I pulled out my 8 or 9 page thing. And I think he was kind of surprised. And he said, well, thank you. I'll take a look at it. And I did get eventually hired. And it turned out that I didn't know about, can I swear on the podcast?
Yeah, well,
an all news radio. I love the format. I listened to the radio station for the news format for years and years and years. I didn't know anything. Like I told you, it was News Talk was always my favorite.
Yeah. And you were there for a long time.
I was there till 2007. For a while there, I was actually overseeing FTL, Wins, and IOD, and that was quite a handful. Both ended up doing pretty well.
You went to Chicago from there?
I ended up in San Antonio.
Oh yes, I do remember that.
At what was considered Lowry Mays' baby, his first station, WOAI, the Blowtorch, which I was thrilled because, in a place like Miami, talk on AM, it's always going to be hammered because of the signal issues as well as just the demographics of the market. It's just never going to have a chance to win. In San Antonio, I knew we had a chance to just kick some ass and we did, and it was so much fun. I mean, it was fun being in, and that was the headquarters of Clear Channel, and I was ready to stay there for some more time, but then an opportunity came to go to WLS in Chicago. Me growing up in the Midwest, WLS was the big top 40 station that I listened to, and it's another big 50,000 watt Clear Channel station. The opportunity for that and for Chicago, a city that as I think you have the same kind of love for. I knew it was going to be a very difficult situation, but I figured, hell, I'm near the end of my career anyway, so whatever happens, that's fine, because I'm just about done anyhow.
I was celebrating a birthday, and I decided to make it a trip. Mm-hmm. And I've never been to Chicago. So I went to Chicago and hunted you down.
Glad you did.
Got to see you and Michelle after quite some time. It had been a long time since we'd seen each other.
We miss Chicago because it was just such a great place to live, because we live downtown and you can walk anywhere. We had a car, which we drove maybe once every 2 weeks to go stock up at Costco. Beautiful city.
That's why I was surprised when I saw Oregon.
I got tired of it. I got tired of the format. I left there about 8 or 9 months before the end of my contract, because I just done with it. In the first 6 months here, I didn't watch the news networks. I didn't really read the paper. I let Michelle tell me what was going on.
Maybe people who listen to the radio don't realize how embedded we get into all that stuff, because we always have to know what's going on. Obviously, you more so in a news format, but
no, you know what? I think I've always pointed that out to you and other talent that I've worked with. It's really, really important for you all to be aware, even though, let's say you're in a music format and you're not expected to make the comments of what's going on in the world. You gotta be aware of those things. People know even if you're not talking about, they know, they can hear this person's jive, this person's not real, or no, this person really cares about the community. Do you read the paper? Yeah, I read the sports section. Well, that's cool, but you should read the front section and the metro section and the art section to find out more of what's going on. And we're just a big believer in that.
Agreed. And I still get the newspaper, although it's very tiny and a fortune now.
I get the Chicago Tribune, the San Antonio Express News, which I fell in love with during the 6 years that I was there, and the Portland Oregonian. And I also get the Washington Post. And all except the Post come in a digital, looks like a newspaper thing, and I love it. Although I really do miss sitting down with a cup of coffee, opening up the real paper, and so I think you kind of luxuriate over it more. I think with the digital format, you're more kind of like scrolling through to find something.
And I came to find, and that's why I still got the paper version, I would find stuff in the paper, little nuggets or articles that would be in the paper that if you didn't know where to look in the digital form, you can't find it.
Right,
so
you're right. Mm-hmm.
That's why I wanted to have you as the guest on my podcast, because you are the person who not only gave me that shot, like I said, worked with me, did air checks, like let me be crazy, let me do crazy stupid bits and stunts, and did crazy stupid stunts for me, bits.
That's right. You proved yourself over and over again. And that's why you ended up over on Light, and the fact that Rob Sidney, who I have tremendous respect for, but who has very definitive ideas on how things are supposed to be. And I'm thinking, like, how's Kimba going to fit in that? And it worked out great.
Do you know, he said, one of the first things he said to me when we were talking was, yeah, it's 4 a.m., damn it. I don't even know if you remember that. I did that request show called It's 4 a.m., damn it, when I did overnights. How does he know that?
He's a radio nerd, like you pulled it off. I mean, that was...
I love the rock format, and I would have never left and still be doing it to this day, because it's my favorite music and that's my first love. Rock was always the struggle as far as ratings, and it was really kind of nice to be at a station that was consistently number one.
But it gave you that opportunity to concentrate on Kimba. By doing that, you just got better and better.
Well, thank you. You were the start of all of that. The type of boss that you were showed how to be a team. Because in that business, there's a lot of cutthroat. There's a lot of backstabbing. And I've told the story in my other podcast with Tom, and even before that first appearance that I did, that I was petrified to be there. And you're like, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. And you went, which PDs usually don't go.
It was a hotel.
You remember that it was on Commercial Boulevard.
There was nothing else around it. And we had no idea what was going to happen that night. But there was a great crowd, and they were there to see you. And I think that The other thing was like, here to see me? Yikes.
What I see more often now than not is the faux camaraderie. Sweet to each other, and as soon as the person leaves the studio, they're where we really were. There was, little things here and there because it's an ego business, so that comes into play a lot. But for the most part, we all got along. We all hung out. We went to your house and you did Bat Kitty.
One of those things where the stars aligned, and we had a very great staff that was very talented, different, and got along. It was just a great team effort.
And Michelle was part of that.
And still is around. Yes, she still is.
How many years now?
33 years in September.
Well, thank you very much for being part of the podcast.
Sure.
I really appreciate it.
Pete Bolger, so glad to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time. It's just great to not only have a career where you do what you love, but to still be able to be friends with bosses and colleagues and listeners all these years later. It's fantastic. Lucky girl. Thank you to Carlos for the Requestion. I hope we answered it a little more for you. Thank you for being one of Kimba's herd. And thanks for listening to Me, Kimba Radio Broadcast, Episode 15, Big Boss Man.
Let's keep this on the radio.
Kimba!